Good morning, Nova Nation. Happy Thursday, and welcome to this special spring break episode of Villanova Sports Talk. And a lot to get to, and we have a full 90-minute episode for you today from now at 11:30 all the way to 1 p.m. And we're going to have Whitey Rigsby join the show at noon, so coming up in just a little bit more than 20 minutes. David Szczepanski with you. As always, glad you could join us. And we have some breaking news as we come on the air today, and that is the Big East Women's Basketball awards throughout the season were just announced, so we'll get to that coming up in just a few moments. We'll, of course, recap Villanova's win against DePaul last night in the Windy City in Chicago. We'll also preview Saturday's game, Senior Day, with Whitey Rigsby. That will be against Xavier at the Fan. And then, of course, we'll talk about Villanova women's basketball, the Big East tournament coming up this weekend in Uncasville, and Villanova going to have a bye on the first day, so Villanova will be off until Friday. In the quarterfinals, the Wildcats are the number 2 seed. We'll talk about some of the potential opponents that they could play, and also go through the Big East seeding as well for both the men's and the women's basketball Big East tournament. So a lot to get to here on a Thursday. Again, thanks for tuning in. David Szczepanski with you from our WXVU studio. It is an overcast day here on campus, some rain in the area, but if you're listening to this in the area, if you're on spring break and tuning in, hope you're doing well wherever you are. And like I said, a lot to get to here on this Thursday. We'll start with the poll questions, as always, and you can vote on my Twitter at WXVU David S. First poll question is, you do have to scroll down a little bit, but first poll question, who was the player of the game for men's basketball versus DePaul last night? Duke Brennan, Tyler Perkins, Devin Askew, or Malachi Palmer? Poll question 2, what will be the result of Villanova men's basketball versus Xavier on Saturday? Villanova wins by 1 to 7 points. Villanova wins by 8 to 13 points. Villanova wins by 14 plus points, or Xavier wins the game. Poll question 3, in your opinion, which team would be the most favorable matchup for Villanova? This is the men's basketball team in the first round of the Big East tournament. Marquette, DePaul, Xavier, or Butler? There's a lot of votes in this poll, and we're going to get Whitey Rigsby's thoughts coming up as well. Poll question 4, our final one today. Will Villanova women's basketball make the Big East Tournament Championship? Again, the Wildcats are the number 2 seed behind undefeated UConn. Yes or no? Again, those are the 4 poll questions. You can vote on my Twitter at WXVU David S. All right. So where we're going to begin today, we're going to start with the breaking news that was announced just a few minutes ago as we were about to come on air. Just around 11 a.m., I would say it was announced. The Big East Women's Basketball Season Awards. And this is big news because the Wildcats had a lot of representation on this list. And of course, this year, it's a little bit unlike the last couple years where the women's basketball side of things in the Big East has kind of been lagging behind a little bit in terms of the schedule, right? It kind of at this point last year, we were just about to finish up men's hoops, and women's basketball in the Big East was still going on. But this year, it's the complete opposite. The Villanova women's basketball team has been done since last Thursday, so they've already had a week off, and they're going to play in the Big East tournament tomorrow, the quarterfinals. That will be on Saturday. Yes, I did say that right. I think I may have messed that up in the open, but they'll play on Saturday in the quarterfinals with the women's basketball team. So they've been off for a week plus, and Coach Dillon talked about that in the post-game show the other day when she was on with Ryan and I at Seton Hall in South Orange in the post-game show about, they were going to practice hard, but it was nice to get that week off, and I'm sure they're enjoying it. But we had the awards announced today, again, for Big East women's basketball. We'll start with the all-conference first team, and Villanova did only have one representative on this list. It was Jasmine Bosco. She was a unanimous selection to the all-conference first team in the Big East. I don't necessarily think that's wrong for her to be the only representative, right? Bryn McCary obviously has had a great season, and she got a few awards as well. We'll talk about Bryn coming up in a moment, but it's fair. I mean, when you look at some of the other names on this list, right, you have KK Arnold, Ozzie Fudd, Sarah Strong from UConn, Ava Zediker from Creighton. She had a really nice season. Skylar Forbes and Haley Weiss from Marquette. Those 2 players are some of the best scorers in the conference, period. Sabu Gay from Providence. She's had a really nice year. And then Savannah Catalone and Mariana Valenzuela for Seton Hall. And all the players on this list, except for one, were a unanimous selection to the all-conference first team. And the only player that actually wasn't a unanimous selection, which was a little bit of a surprise to me, was KK Arnold. And yes, she doesn't average the most points, but what she's done in terms of playmaking, that offense for the Huskies, I think has been really, really special. So I'm a little surprised that she wasn't a unanimous selection. I think if you could maybe kind of argue a little bit, right, you could maybe say that Bryn McCary should be there over Mariana Valenzuela, even though she's had a great season. Maybe you could argue Danae Carter over the last couple weeks, but I think that list is just about right in terms of the players that are there. And then when you look at the all-conference second team, there are 6 players on this team. Blanca Quinones from UConn, she's had a really great year. Kate Novick from DePaul, that was the lone DePaul representative on the first or second team for the Big East All-Conference. Lee Volker from Marquette, Brooke Moore from St. John's, Mariah Noel from Xavier, and then there's Villanova's Bryn McCary in that all-conference second team. That's a great achievement, right? Because Bryn has really battled through some tough injuries over the last couple of years, so it's good to see her get her praise, her well-deserved praise, in the all-conference second team. And yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that over the last couple of weeks, maybe she's kind of taken a little bit of a step backwards, but I think it's just been because of how good Jasmine Bosco has been over the last couple of weeks. When she's averaging 20, 21 points per game, you feed her the ball a little bit more, and maybe that's taken a little bit away from Bryn. In addition to that, Danae Carter's been awesome over the last month, much, much better than where maybe Danae was at the beginning of the season, and she's kind of gotten better as things have gone on here in this 2025-2026 campaign. But good to see Bryn there on the all-conference second team. And then the all-conference first team, Villanova also had a representative, Kennedy Henry, a unanimous selection, and this was great for Kennedy because she didn't end up winning the Big East Freshman of the Year award, but she's had an awesome campaign for Villanova this year, and I think the biggest thing for the Wildcats is obviously keeping her around for a long time because she can score. I think that's obvious. She can shoot the ball well from three-point range, but she is Villanova's best defender, and she's just a freshman, and I don't think that's a hot take. She has been the best defender. What she can do on ball, even off ball, is really, truly special. She's locked up some of the best players in this conference, time in and time out. So I'm really excited to see her continue to get better, and hopefully she stays here on the main line for some time. But Kennedy Henry, great to see her. She was a unanimous selection, no surprise there. You also had Zahara Bishop, who we got to see the other day for Seton Hall. She was the only not unanimous selection on this list. You had Nathalie Gesser, Ava Zedeker from Creighton. Those are the 2 Creighton representatives. And then Blanca Quinones from UConn. She was also a unanimous selection. So good to see Kennedy Henry on that list of 5 players. Again, that was the Big East All-Conference freshman team. And then the Big East All-Conference defensive team, just talked about it with Kennedy Henry. Great to have her on there. She leads the way along with Savannah Catalone for Seton Hall, Skylar Forbes for the Golden Eagles, and then KK Arnold and Sarah Strong both on this list for the defensive team. And I think it's really saying something, right? Sarah Strong was the player of the year, but she's so good offensively. She's got a lot of size. She can really rebound the ball well for UConn, but she's also a great defender. So I think that really speaks volumes as well with her being on this list. But Kennedy Henry named to the All-Conference freshman team, All-Conference defensive team. You could say that she had an argument to be on the all-conference second team as well. I don't think that would be wrong. There were some players, I think, that just score the ball a little bit more than Kennedy at this point in her career, but I wouldn't be surprised if Kennedy, is on the all-conference second team next year. If she stays around here on the main line, I don't think that would be a surprise to anybody at all. Sarah Strong was the conference player of the year. I announced that earlier, but then also Bryn McCary was the all Big East most improved player, So she is going to be the most improved player for the Big East. That's great for Bryn. Like I said, she has battled some tough injuries, and for her to come back and play at the level she had, or she has been really impressive. And, you have to remember that this is a Villanova team that was predicted to finish 4th in the conference. They're going to get the 2 seed heading into the Big East, and it's not even close. I mean, they ran away with the 2 seed really at the end of things. And in addition to that, what I really liked about this Villanova team is coming into the year, you didn't have Maddie Weber. You didn't really know where things were going to go. You had to find some offense, right? You know that Jasmine Bosco was going to be there, but it was kind of who else was going to step up. You had Danae Carter, who was a starter. You had hoped that Kelsey Jones would provide some good shooting coming in from Iowa State. Ryan Allen could shoot the ball well, but who was really going to be that number 2 scorer? And Bryn McCary has really stepped up nicely into that spot. So congratulations to Bryn and everybody on this list for all the teams, especially Villanova. And then also DePaul's graduate student forward Meg Newman. She received the Sportsmanship Award. And then Coach Oriema was the Big East Coach of the Year for the 14th time. It's our 13th ever undefeated Big East finish. He's led UConn to 47 straight wins. And then I said earlier, Blanca Quinones of UConn, she was the 16th Husky to win Big East Freshman of the Year. She won it over Villanova's Kennedy Henry there in that list. So those are I was about to say preseason. Those are the season awards for the women's basketball team and in the Big East play. So that is important to take a look at. And now we're going to get to Villanova men's basketball. We're going to be switching gears a lot here. I will preview the women's basketball Big East tournament at the towards the end of the show, right around the 12:30, 12:40-ish time slot. We'll talk about the Big East tournament. Now, I want to shift my attention to Villanova versus DePaul last night in men's basketball because we're going to be having Whitey Rigsby join the show coming up in just about 20 minutes at noon, again here on the Spring Break Special here on Villanova Sports Talk. And Villanova defeated DePaul last night, again shifting gears to men's basketball by a final score of 76-57. And this was a game where Villanova did not start off all that well right I said it in my recap video earlier this morning. At the under 16 media timeout, both Villanova and DePaul had only combined for 3 points. I mean, that's how good, well, you could say that's how good the defenses were. I think it's more like that's how bad the offenses were in the first 5 minutes or so of that contest in the Windy City. But Villanova pulled away. And this was a game where, over the last couple of years, I think you would have sat here and say, Villanova, right, they should win, but they've lost some games they should have won over the last couple of years. Maybe they don't. And heading into this game, I was not as optimistic as I think others were, right? First game without Matt Hodge, who suffered the torn ACL against St. John's. He's out for the year, going to have surgery, probably sidelined for at least 9 months, somewhere around there. But what was really surprising was that, coming into the game, like I said, I wasn't as optimistic as others. I thought it was going to be an adjustment period offensively for Villanova to get used to playing without Matt Hodge. Villanova only won by a few points against DePaul in the first match with the Fin. This game is on the road. DePaul has 11 home wins this year. Coach Holtman has done a fantastic job for the program. DePaul is still in the driver's seat for the 6th seed. If they won last night against Villanova, DePaul could get as high as the 4th seed. So Villanova may see DePaul again in a couple of weeks at Madison Square Garden. But I was wrong, and I'm happy to be wrong. Villanova played really well in this game, 76-57. They outscored DePaul by 17 points in the second half. Duke Brennan had his 13th double-double of his career, 7 for 9 from the field, too, so ultra efficient. 12 rebounds, 2 assists, 10 defensive rebounds. And then Tyler Perkins, 20 points. Perkins has struggled over the last few weeks. I think we've talked about it on the broadcast, talked about it on both the pre and the post-game shows as well. But Perkins, I mean, he really picked up his points last night in Chicago. 20 points, 4 steals, 6 rebounds. He was all over the stat sheet, all over the floor last night as well. Played 35 minutes for Villanova, too. And then also Devin Askew hit some big buckets in this game, and he's been kind of the go-to guy on the road for Villanova. Hit some clutch threes. He was 2 for 5 from three-point range, 4 for 8 from the field for 14 points, and 5 rebounds, 2 assists, including 5 defensive rebounds. Did play with 3 personal fouls, but he was really good. And then also to end things out here, Malachi Palmer, who got the start last night for Matt Hodge. I mean, it was a really good first start for Malachi. And Kevin Willard talked about in the post-game press conference how there was a little bit of an emotion to that first half. Villanova was trying to shake off some of the rust, right? Malachi's getting his first start. How is the team going to respond? But Palmer was really good. 10 points, 5 rebounds, and it took him some time to get going, but he played well in this contest. And, I'm still concerned about the depth of this team. And I talked about it on Twitter the other day, and I think it's a good thing to bring up. I mean, obviously, the Matt Hodge injury is really, really bad for this team and for the outlook of March Madness. Really just wishing the best for Matt and obviously a speedy recovery. When you look at this team, the depth, which was already really struggled when Matt Hodge was in the starting lineup, continued to really get worse, right? Tafari Gapari is obviously no longer with the team. Duke Brennan, his left wrist was taped up again last night. Obviously, it didn't bother him. He had his 13th double-double of the year, but it's something to monitor. He's battled a variety of different injuries throughout the year, had a thigh injury earlier this year. And then in addition to that, right, Zion Stanford, he was out last night for undisclosed reasons. We didn't get a reason or an injury why Stanford was not seemingly with the team last night in Chicago. And then also Malachi Palmer's a question mark because he just hasn't played a whole lot. And he is a guard. He's got some size, but he's a guard. How does Villanova manage that in terms of rebounding? And last night, it really wasn't close. It was 35-29 in favor of Villanova. And I will say that I thought that Devin Askew provided some good length off the bench with 5 rebounds. Chris Jeffrey scored 2 points in 3 minutes. Braden Pierce, which is also a question mark. And I do think Braden Pierce has played better recently. In the beginning of the season, you could really tell that he was mismatched. He was at a disadvantage when he was in the game, more so defensively than anything. He's played better recently, but I think the question that you still have to ask is, can you trust him for 8 to 10 minutes in some of these big games down the stretch? I don't know if he's quite there yet. I probably would say no. But that's where the depth is really extremely thin. And Villanova won this game against DePaul. They played better than I thought they would. First game without Matt Hodge, so I give them credit for that. Give credit to Coach Willard, who made some really great adjustments in the second half. But still where I'm at is this was a win against a DePaul team that, even though they're having a good year, 16-14 overall compared to what they have over the last few years, still they're 8-11 in Big East play. They're not a St. John's. They're not a UConn. They're not even a Seton Hall. This is a team that is in the mid-tier of the Big East. Right now in that 6th seed, they're going to have to play Wednesday night at Madison Square Garden as of right now. So I'm curious to see how this continues to evolve. Can Villanova consistently run their starters out there for 35 minutes and get away with it? And maybe it's possible, but I think you're going to see some of those more issues exposed when you play a good team like a St. John's or UConn, or when you play in March Madness against some of these better teams. I think that could be exposed a little bit more. And this has been an issue that I've been talking about even before the Matt Hodge injury, and that, of course, made things worse in terms of the depth on this team. And, the other thing I'll talk about, Villanova's three-point offense struggled a lot in the first half once again, right? This is a team that, I was trying to do the stat at halftime, and I believe in the last, so the 3 games prior to the game against DePaul, and the first half last night against the Blue Demons, Villanova was shooting just about 25 to 26% from behind the arc in their last 7 halves of basketball heading into halftime last night in Chicago. 25% as a team. Now look, you can say you faced St. John's, you didn't play well, nothing went right for you. You obviously had a lot of emotions with Matt, unfortunately, going down with the injury, and Duke Brennan a little bit banged up. So there was a lot of emotions there. UConn played a really strong game against Villanova in South Philly. But this DePaul three-point defense is one of the worst in college basketball. 302nd, according to Bart Torvik. And Villanova really struggled from behind the arc in the first half. And luckily in the second half, they picked it up. Ended the day 7 for 21, 33% from behind the arc. But once again, I wasn't all that impressed with what I saw from Villanova behind the arc, especially against a three-point defense that has really, really struggled this year. So those are some things. I talked about the positives. Perkins was really good. Brennan was really good. I thought Palmer stepped up without Matt Hodge. Askew played well. Villanova limited turnovers. They had 11 against a team that does force some turnovers in DePaul. Villanova shot the ball well from the free throw line, 17 for 23. They out-rebounded DePaul. They won the assist battle. They did lose the battle in the paint, but they won the rebounding battle, so I'll take it, and it was close enough to where Villanova could keep it competitive. But the thing that I really, the two things that I guess I should say are my biggest questions coming out of this game last night. One is the three-point offense. Now, Villanova was lucky that DePaul only shot 13% from three-point range. It was one of the worst three-point shooting games all season for DePaul. But Villanova, like I said, as a team was 7 for 21, 33%. And luckily, in the second half, Villanova knocked down some shots. They outscored DePaul by 17, as I mentioned earlier in the open. But the three-point offense has me concerned. I mean, you just go up and down the roster. Lindsay was 2 for 5. Perkins was 2 for 7. Palmer was 1 for 4 from behind the arc. And those are your starters. So that has been something that obviously hasn't helped Villanova in this game. And then when you continue to kind of go down the list, Villanova's also had issues on the right. Askew was 2 for 5, but really Villanova is a team 7 for 21 from three-point range. And then the other thing that I'll talk about that I thought was something to monitor, as I mentioned earlier, was just the depth in this game. Can Villanova consistently rebound well and play competitive enough in the paint to beat teams like a St. John's or a UConn or stay competitive? Because, let's face it, Villanova is in March Madness. They're a lock. They're probably an 8 seed as of right now. Villanova wants to get to that 7 seed spot. And if they win a couple games in the Big East tournament, maybe knock off a UConn or a St. John's, they could get there. But they're going to need to continue to rebound. So this was a good win, right? It's the only test you have without Matt Hodge to kind of see where things are. And I give credit, like I said, to this team. I felt they played well, especially in the second half. Kevin Willer made some really good adjustments in the final 20 minutes. But, like I said, can they do this against a team that is a St. John's, a UConn, a team that's at the top of the conference, or in addition to that, a team when they do get into March Madness? That's still a question to be seen, and we'll continue to kind of work things out there and see how everything goes. But like I said, I thought there were a lot more positives than negatives last night in Chicago, 76-57 against DePaul, and Villanova now 23-7, 8 Big East road wins this year, which is the most for the team since the 2015-2016 season, so a decade. So Villanova's played really well on the road, and it would be nice to see them finish out the season against Saturday against Xavier at home with some good play in front of the home crowd at the Finn before heading to Madison Square Garden. But like I said, all in all, a 19-point win. I think you have to like that if you're Villanova, right? First game without Matt Hodge. I thought it was a positive sign. DePaul is a gritty team. Like I said, they've impressed this year just in terms of where they've been the last few years for Coach Holtman, so he's done a great job with that program. But we'll definitely see how the test goes on Saturday against Xavier, a team that's also dealing with a lot of injuries. Xavier might be without Trey Carroll, the best scorer, you could say, in the Big East. So we'll definitely keep an eye on that as well. We'll take a break here on Villanova Sports Talk, again, recapping Villanova's win against DePaul last night in the Windy City. Coming up in less than 10 minutes, Whitey Rigsby is going to join the program. We're going to discuss everything about Villanova men's basketball. We'll continue to discuss Villanova versus DePaul. We'll, of course, preview Villanova versus Xavier and get all the thoughts on where Villanova stands heading into the Big East tournament. As always, you can vote on the poll questions on my Twitter, at WXVU David S. And again, stay tuned. Second half of today's show, right around the 12:30, 12:40 time slot, we're going to discuss Villanova women's basketball and the run to the Big East tournament this weekend in Uncasville. We'll be right back here on WXVU, V89.1, The Roar. Welcome back to Villanova Sports Talk here on a Thursday morning, the special spring break edition of Villanova Sports Talk. David Szczepanski with you again. Coming up just about 5 minutes, we'll have Whitey Rigsby join the show, talk about everything men's basketball coming up. Before we get to that, let's take a look at the latest bracketology for both men's and women's basketball. We'll start with the women's team, and again, we'll wrap up the show talking about the Big East tournament in Uncasville. Right now, the women's team is slotted in that 9 spot, the 9 seed in the Big East tournament, in the March Madness, according to Charlie Cream of ESPN. Right now, scheduled to take on USC as the 8th seed. If Villanova were to win that game, they take on Texas in Austin. That is the bracketology right now. Again, according to Charlie Cream with ESPN. That was updated actually this morning, so very recent bracketology. And then the men's team still kind of right now on that edge of that 7-8 seed. We'll see exactly where everything does end up working out. But right now, Joe Lunardi of ESPN has Villanova as a 7 seed to take on the 10 seed TCU in Buffalo. And if Villanova were able to defeat TCU, they would take on the winner of Michigan State and Wright State, according to ESPN's Joe Lunardi. That was updated on the 3rd of March, so we'll see if we get an update coming up over the next few days. But that's where the bracketology stands. Again, the women's basketball team will be in action on Friday. That game will be in Uncasville. I'll talk about that towards the end of today's program. And then the men's team with a big senior day opportunity on Saturday against Xavier. So a lot coming up here. A busy month of March, but great to be talking about as both teams seem to be well locked up on their way to the big dance. We'll take a break here on Villanova Sports Talk. A short break. When we come back, Whitey Rigsby will join the show. Again, stay tuned for more Nova Nation. You can vote on the poll questions at WXVU David S. Be right back here on WXVU V89.1 The Roar. Welcome back to Villanova Sports Talk here on this overcast Thursday morning, just about to hit noon. David Szczepanski alongside Whitey Rigsby with you here on the WXVU Studio WXVU home base, Villanova Sports Talk Spring Break Special Edition. Whitey, thank you so much for joining me today. Appreciate it. Always a pleasure to chat basketball with you.
Why don't I get spring break? What happened to that?
That's a good point. Well, maybe you could argue for it in your next contract.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see.
But potentially. But great to be with you as always on a Thursday. Hope everybody out there is doing well. Everybody coming on in here in this noon hour. We appreciate it. Again, still an hour left to go. We'll be live from 12 to 1 p.m. here. You can vote on the poll questions on my Twitter at WXVU David S. as always. Whitey, the first half of the show talked about Villanova versus DePaul, the win last night in Chicago. You guys got back in 3 a.m. Last night, but you made it here. I appreciate you joining us. 76-57 win. Wasn't a perfect performance, a little sloppy in the first half in terms of offensively, but they picked it up, outscored DePaul by 17 in the second half. What are your initial takeaways from last night's win?
Well, I did not think, honestly, before the game we were going to win that game. I think with the loss of Matt Hodge, not just that we lost Matt Hodge, but you're now playing without Matt Hodge. You're playing without that starter that you've had all year long. Your bench is getting shorter and shorter. And DePaul, I thought, and Ryan, my partner, disagreed with me a little. I thought DePaul had a lot to play for. They're playing for a possible bye in the first round of the Big East tournament, which I'm not sure when the last time they had one, and also to play a Villanova team that had beaten them 28 out of 29 times. So I thought they had a lot to play for. But the first half, especially the first 12 minutes of that game, was a defensive clinic, we'll call it, because I don't want to see how bad the offense was. But neither team could score, neither team could make a shot. But Villanova, under Coach Willard, they've made some great adjustments throughout the year at halftime, and whatever adjustments they made were terrific in the second half. You needed, and I said to Coach Willard before the game, I said, you need Bryce Lindsey and/or Devin Askew to make 3 or 4 threes in a game, and then you're going to be fine. One of those guys has to make it. And we saw it in the second half. Askew got really hot and had 14, all of his points in the second half.
That was really impressive, and I thought the three-point shooting got better. DePaul, one of the worst perimeter defenses in all of college basketball, 302, according to Bart Torvik coming into the game last night. And I liked what you said about DePaul, because this was a team that had a chance at the 4 seed in the Big East as of yesterday. Now they're eliminated from the 4 seed. Seton Hall will have that spot, but still a 56% chance to get that 5 seed and have that bye. So definitely something to keep an eye on there. But in addition, right, we've talked about it. You mentioned it there in the open, Matt Hodge, the injury, right, the torn ACL against St. John's. You've been around a lot of Villanova teams, a lot of Villanova locker rooms. What does an injury like Matt's do to a locker room, and especially this late in a season when you're about to begin a playoff run?
That's the thing. I was trying to think back as to a late season injury where you just lose a starter completely. He's gone. It's happened before. We've had other injuries and things like that, but an injury like this, it eliminates one of your guys. And plus, personally, for Matt Hodge, who got basically screwed out of his freshman year last year. We had to sit
Absolutely.
out all year long, and then he's playing. He starts all 29 games. Was a big factor. Didn't probably rebound as much as they would have liked him to, but was very much involved in every game after game. Defended very well, and I just feel bad for him so much so that. And he's, again, I reiterate, such a good kid. I look forward to him rehabbing this summer and being ready to play next October is what they're saying the time frame is. But I just think that you got to get used to playing with a different guy. And again, if you saw the minutes yesterday, Coach Wheeler basically played 6 guys, period.
Yeah, that's a good point. When you take a look back at the rotation from yesterday, you really had Devin Askew as the 6th man, and Chris Jeffrey got in there a little bit, so did Braden Pierce. And that kind of brings us to the next question. Malachi Palmer, who got the start, it seems like he's going to get a majority of the minutes that Matt would have gotten in that starting spot. He had 10 points, had 5 rebounds, 3 for 9 from the field, 1 for 4 from behind the arc. What did you make of Malachi's performance last night?
Same thing. All 10 points were in the second half. He and Askew scored 24 points in the second half between the two of them. Malachi Palmer, to me, over the last month, has played better and better. And usually it kind of goes the other way when you play. Guys play very well in November, December, and then they get in a league play, and it's completely different. It's more physical. You're playing a team that you've already played. It's much harder to play in league play. And he, as a young player in this league, I think he's been much, much better last month. And so I think he's ready to be a starter. I wish he wasn't, because if he wasn't, then Matt would still be here. But coming off the bench, I think he was great. But I think he's playing better and better. He defends well. He also probably. All these guys probably need to rebound more just because they can't leave Duke completely by himself. And but again, even yesterday they went back to playing 4 guards. Ryan and I talked on the air about Randy Foy was the original guard who was a 4-man. So they're going to probably do some of that this year, the remainder of this year. And in particular, Perk's a very good rebounder, as Ryan would say, for a guard. But I think he's a very good rebounder, so he'll help a lot.
I think a lot of people in the Nova Nation sphere have a concern about the bench, and specifically the rotation when you head into the Big East tournament. I mentioned earlier when you play a team like a UConn or a St. John's again, or looking down the road to March Madness. What do you think the bench needs to provide for Villanova at this point? What do you take a look at the bench?
Well, I think they're going to need to get more than anything. I think they're going to find a way, and Coach Willard's done a great job of this, is finding a way to rest Duke Brennan. He's kind of an island out there. He's the big guy. We don't have another big guy that plays that starts. Sure, Braden Pierce comes off the bench. If Braden Pierce can come off the bench and give them a solid, no harm, no foul, 6-7 minutes, that'll help. I think they'll probably, like in the past, they could put Hodge and Malachi Palmer on the court and take Brennan out for a little bit. I don't think they can do that anymore. You can't play 5 guards. So I think they're going to have to get some minutes out of Braden Pierce, but I think Duke's going to have to just plan on that he's going to be playing as much. That's why last night, in the last few seconds of the first half, he picked up a second foul. That I was not very happy about that, because they need him to be on the court. He's a difference maker inside.
And I think it's interesting to see if teams will begin to attack Duke a little bit more, because they know that Villanova's depth is thin.
Yeah, that just makes way too much sense, and they have to again. But most teams have those players that can do that, and you see him at time for time, like backing off to try not to pick up a foul. But he's by nature he's an aggressive player, and that's a hard thing for him to do.
And Brennan has 13th double-double of the season last night, second most in Villanova program history, 15 points and 12 rebounds against the Blue Demons in Chicago. Whitey also, Coach Willard talked about this in the post-game press conference, 8 Big East road wins for Villanova, the most since 2015 to 2016. What makes this team so tough on the road?
Well, and I'll add to it by saying that the league is tougher in this regard than it has been in a long, long time. In other words, Coach Will and I talked, there's no team in this league that's 2-17. There's so many teams that are, you know it very well, and I know it very well. I'm not sure I could say right now who I think is going to finish from 5 to 11 or 6 to 11. You just don't know, and therefore there's not 2 teams that are 2-18, but you have a whole bunch of teams. You look at Providence beat St. John's in the Garden. Creighton beat Connecticut in Stores. That doesn't make any sense at all. So therefore, that's why we go to DePaul last night, and DePaul in their home court in a big game for them. I had real concerns about that game.
And I think it's just been so key and so important, because you've heard people say it, that they do play better at times on the road than they do at home. It's just that mentality, but it's a great thing to have, especially when you play in some of those neutral sites coming up.
Yeah, and also generally younger players, I'd be more concerned with playing on the road for the first time. The different atmospheres, the different.
Seems like it doesn't bother a Caden at all.
It doesn't. I don't think it bothers any of these kids at all, and I think that's great, especially as the season's gone on. Now, I'm never one that believes like freshmen become sophomores by March. No, they're not. They're still freshmen. But he's still doing some things for the first time. But in the league now, he's playing Xavier. Well, they just played Xavier a couple of weeks ago, so he knows Xavier's personnel. And in that particular game, as we'll get to that, Trey Carroll, it'd be interesting to see if he plays. He only played 4 minutes the other day. I talked to the one referee who's a very good friend of mine actually, and who reffed that game, and said, yeah, he got hurt early. He said he barely played. I said, well, I checked the numbers. He played 4 minutes.
That's it.
And a hip injury, I'm not exactly sure what a hip injury is. That a hip pointer? What is it? And how long does it keep you out?
That's a great point, and that's a great segue. I mean, Whitey, and talking about this Xavier team, 14-16 overall are the Musketeers. Definitely a down year, I think, compared to where you expected Xavier to be. Hiring Coach Pitino to come in and lead that program moving forward, but have to start with Trey Carroll. I mean, he's averaging 18 points per game, one of the best players in the Big East, one of the best scorers, 35% from behind the arc. As you mentioned, played just 4 minutes the other day in the loss to Seton Hall for Xavier. So even if Trey Carroll plays, what do you expect from this Xavier team?
Well, the thing about Xavier, they're almost the opposite of DePaul. Like, when we got ahead of DePaul late in that game, I didn't have any fear because they can't score in a hurry. Because they don't, you talk about defensively, they don't make a lot of threes. Like, there's no one. They were at one time, they were like 1 for 14 or 15.
13% from behind the arc last
and, and the one that was made in the first half was a wild shot he had to make at the end of the shot clock. As opposed to Xavier has a whole bunch of guys who make threes, and some of those guys are like 6'10", 6'11", 7 foot that shoot threes. So this is going to be a game that's going to be played very much on the perimeter. And back to your point earlier, that might be good for Villanova because they're not going to be pounding the ball in on Duke Brennan. So I think Villanova, again, at home on their home court, it's a court they practice on regularly. The depth perception thing should really favor Villanova. As you mentioned earlier, senior day should be a good crowd in the building.
And the first matchup for Xavier against Villanova was a 92-89 thrilling win in Cincinnati, a very high-scoring battle. I think it would be crazy if you get something like that again. What do you expect to happen in the second matchup? Do you think maybe the defenses play a little better? I mean, Xavier's defense has struggled this season, allowing almost 80 points per game.
Yeah, I would think Villanova would want to play a lower scoring game in this game, slow it down a little bit. Although, Coach doesn't like to think that he slows the ball down. I kind of think he does, but he doesn't want to admit that. But I think that in this kind of game, you want to play a lower scoring game. That game ended up going into overtime, as you mentioned, and the bottom line is, when you're on the road in this league, I'll take a 1-point win by 1, go home. I'm fine with that. So the fact we won by 19 yesterday was absurd. But same thing at home game. This game is one of those games we just have to win. And if you look, David, at this season, Villanova, from people from our perspective, have won all the games they're supposed to win. You could say maybe Creighton at home we should have won. And what we know now about Creighton, you could say, yeah, we should have won that game. But everything else, the games kind of fell the way we expected. The one good win, I think, was on the road with Wisconsin. And the one bad loss, you could say, was Creighton at home. But everything else has kind of fallen into place.
I totally agree. And also the Xavier team, one more note, we'll talk about it coming up in a little bit. But Xavier's just 1-9 away this year. So a team that has not played well on the road at all. And they have just 6 conference wins this year. Again, most recently that loss to Seton Hall. Xavier coming in having lost 4 of the last 5. The lone win was against Georgetown. 91-84 against Georgetown. High scoring.
Georgetown's another team that's all messed up.
They could be the 11th seed. They could be the worst team in the Big East.
And Providence a couple of weeks ago, everybody, after the whole Bryce Hopkins thing, was left for dead. And then all of a sudden they win 3 games. And then they get bombed last night at home. We talked different things about this season. Georgetown goes to Providence, shoots 1 for 23. I'm sorry, they're down 21 in the second half, right, and win. They go to DePaul, they shoot 1 for 23 in the second half. St. John's goes to Connecticut, to Hartford, and they shoot 2 of 24. They missed their last 20 shots in the game or something like that. That's crazy. But, I just think this game is probably going to be a higher scoring game because they're going to score a lot of points. They're going to start to shoot a lot of threes.
Well, looking ahead to the Big East tournament, it's not that far away. 1 week from today, Villanova will be playing
very
in
late
New York.
At night. So stay awake. Drink some coffee,
I'll do my best. Here's the question that everybody wants to know. Do you think we'll be playing after the clock strikes midnight on Thursday into Friday?
David, I'm an older gentleman, and last year that game started like 10:15, I think. And plus, in the Garden now, as opposed to in the past, you're sitting up high in the Garden when you press 8 on the elevator, which we do to get to our seats.
I press 10.
I know. I can't see you from where I sit, but I hope not. It's just so late. But, as we said off the air beforehand, I just so much didn't want to be the 6th seed this year to play in that late game. So I got my wish. We're not the 6th seed. We're the 3 seed, and we play in that late game. But, that's all right. It's New York City, and the Big East tournament is such, you've gone there before. It's such an exciting time. Someone said to me years ago, it's the best 2.4 days of the year. It is. It's just a lot of fun. There'll be a lot of Villanova people up there. Villanova draws very well up there. And with St. John's being really good again, the building will just be electric.
And the positive is Villanova doesn't have to play on Wednesday night for the first time in 3 years. So that's impressive. Taking a look at the standings right now, UConn leading the way in St. John's. Both of those teams have pulled away, 17-2 in conference play. But we talked about in the beginning, Whitey, the rest of the Big East, really from 5 all the way down, right? You have Seton Hall just locked up that 4 seed. The only 2 teams that actually have officially locked up their seed. Villanova's the 3 seed and Seton Hall's the 4 seed. But the rest of the way, very close. Creighton all the way down to Georgetown. it's been I don't want to say controversial, but a topic online about who would be the best matchup for Villanova, favorable-wise. And I want to get your thoughts on this. I mean, Marquette is a team that I think Villanova has to stay away from because Marquette has really battled Villanova toe-to-toe down to the wire. Some other teams, DePaul, Providence, who apparently Kim English will not be returning to next year, according to Adam Zagoria. The rest of the way, I mean, you have Butler. Right now, it seems like Villanova will play the winner of DePaul versus Georgetown. But overall, if you could pick a team, who do you think is the most favorable matchup?
I think I'd probably like to play Providence, partially for what you just said, but also because they couldn't guard you. In other words, they could score, but
I think they could guard me.
Well, it's funny. They in Seton Hall. Like Seton Hall couldn't score on you,
sure,
but they guard the heck out of you. And Providence is just the opposite. They score like. And I've talked to their broadcast I've known for years and years. Like Joey Hass, I played against back in the '70s. Their color guy. But he says we don't guard anybody. And this is a guy who shot them off in the street. He doesn't know where he didn't guard anybody either. But they don't guard anybody. But I just think for our team, I think that's the team I'd like to play the most. I don't fear them. I don't fear them inside much. Some of these other teams have powerful inside players. And if you think the teams we lost to, like Michigan had 2 or 3 real big guys all the time, and St. John's has maybe one of the best 4 or 5 combinations in the league. And I think St. John's is better than Connecticut, even though they lost to Connecticut by 32. St. John's just has a lot of guys. They have a lot of players. And so but that would be the next round. But as far as who do you want to play in the first round, I guess my first feeling would be Providence and maybe Georgetown after that.
I agree with you. I think my initial reaction to this was Butler because Villanova's played very well. I think you could argue 2 of the best games this season in conference play have both come against Butler. But with Providence, the news last night from Zagoria that Kim English will not return.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Is there a whole lot for the Friars to be playing for? I don't know.
No.
So that's a good point.
It's the worry I have with Butler, and you're right, we've played well against him, is Michael Ajayi. Because
sure.
he's one of those guys who just pounds the ball in the lane, and we can't afford to have Duke Brennan sitting on the bench.
And especially without Hodge, that test gets a lot tougher.
Yeah, that would be the matchup. Matt Hodge had most of the best matchups in the league, as it turns out. Mm-hmm. That would be his matchup. He plays against St. John's. He's matching up with Bryce Hopkins. So those are all different matchups now. But yeah, that's the only reason I hold off on Butler, just because of Ajayi.
I agree. And it's also, I mean, now that Georgetown's really started, I think it's good to think about them because really, I mean, Georgetown could defeat DePaul. It's not
11 can beat 6 for sure. There's no more so this year than ever before.
And Georgetown played well against Villanova in D.C. It was a game that really came down to the wire. Caden Lewis, 25 points. That was really the difference in his homecoming. So that's also a matchup that scares me a little bit. Yeah, I mean, Georgetown is technically the worst team in the Big East, 5-14. But like you said, between Providence and Georgetown, they're separated by 2 games, and that's the span of 5 seeds there in the Big East.
Again, it's crazy, and it's hard to figure out. Even with St. John's and Connecticut, one of them is going to finish first, 1 second. It depends on what happens between Providence and Creighton, because those are the 2 teams they lost to.
And a big game, Seton Hall, St. John's coming up as well before the end to kind of see how things continue to go on.
If Seton Hall has any NCAA aspirations, they need to win that game.
They do.
That game, I believe that's it in Nebraska. It's in Newark. Isn't it?
Yes, that game is at home for Seton Hall. I do know that. Let me do a quick little
home game at Seton
search.
Hall. If they can beat St. John's, that's really going to help their chances. And then if they can find a way to get to the finals, the Final Four of the Big East tournament, they have a chance to sneak in the back end of the tournament.
So that game, March 6th tomorrow, Friday 9 p.m. at the Prudential Center in Newark. That's a late one as well, isn't it? Those 9 p.m. tip-offs. Whitey, before we let you go. Looking ahead to the NCAA tournament, Villanova appears to be a lock at this point. I think it's a matter of the seeding and how the rest of the season goes. You would love to see Villanova pick up the win on Saturday against Xavier and a couple wins in the Big East tournament, right? If you pick up 2 in the Big East tournament, you may get a 6 seed if all things go well. Where do you think Villanova stands heading into the Big East heading into the NCAA tournament?
What you said is what I like. You win Saturday, win the first game in the Big East tournament, get to the semifinals on Friday night. When you get there, you have a chance to win. But I think I would like to see Villanova get a 6 seed, just because I think the idea of 6-3 I like much better than 7-2 or 8-1. As far as that game on Sunday or game on Saturday.
And those 8-9 matchups are never easy.
No, they're not. So I just think that I'm hoping we can find a way to get a 6 seed. Now that's going to have to be, we're going to have to win, and also some other teams in the mix are going to have to lose. But let's face it, when you get to this time of year, most teams that are in the NCAA tournament lose their last game before the NCAA tournament. right? I mean, it's only how many teams win? 5 or 6 win their
Sure.
league. So someone else is going to lose a game too, and hopefully they'll lose to a lesser team than Villanova. If Villanova loses to Connecticut or St. John's.
And it would be great for Villanova if the Providence could do something to St. John's that they did earlier this year at the Garden. Or
Find a way, yeah.
And like you said, I don't think it's impossible. I mean, is it unlikely? Severely. But is it impossible this year? I think in past years you would say, yeah, probably. Is it impossible this year? I don't think so.
No,
really
and
don't.
again, St. John's already lost at home to Providence. Connecticut already lost at home to Creighton. So who's to say somebody else can't beat them? Of course they can. And I just think it's such a blessing this year after the last 3 years we've gone through to be in this position where, yeah, we're going to be in the NCAA tournament, and now I'm just begging that we don't go to Buffalo. Which is probably the most likely place, but between Tampa and San Diego, I kind of like those places a little
the
better.
warmer weather.
There, you betcha.
There you go. Last question for you, Whitey. Don't want to put you on the spot, but heading into the Big East tournament, heading into the NCAA tournament, who is the guy, the player on this Villanova team? Who do you think is the X factor, in other words?
Well, I think as I've beaten a dead horse here, I think Duke Brennan has to stay on the court. I think he stays on the court. Okay, then who's the most important guy? Probably Caden Lewis. He runs the show. I mean, he shows he can score 20, 25 points. They certainly need, and I'm spreading myself all over the place, they certainly need Bryce Lindsey and Devin Askew to make shots. But I just think Duke Brennan staying on the court, and then a Caden Lewis who can, as a freshman point guard, he's been pretty darn good all season long.
And these environments truly don't seem to bother him. They don't seem to faze him at all.
Not at all. And I know as a player, and Kevin and I have talked about this also, I would much rather play in an opponent's venue that's loud and raucous. Like last night, it wasn't really. They only had 4,000 people in the building. But I'd much rather go in a place where people are yelling and screaming at me the whole time. It just gets you more into it than playing in a game. It's like a glorified gym.
And that adrenaline rush is
it's
what
great.
players play for.
Especially for, again, I hate to say a young kid. I mean, he's 18, 19 years old and a freshman, so he's had a tremendous year.
Well, thank you so much, Whitey, for joining us. Looking forward to whatever the next few weeks bring. Hopefully, we're talking again in late March about a deep run somewhere.
I hope so. Bring your binoculars for New York.
There you go. I will bring my binoculars. I'll bring my coffee, and I'll leave a pot for you and Ryan as well.
I appreciate it. Thanks,
Madison Square Garden.
Thank
you so much, Whitey.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Well, we'll take a break here on Villanova Sports Talk. When we come back, I'll continue to preview Villanova versus Xavier for Senior Day on Saturday. And also, of course, the women's basketball team is making their way to Connecticut, Uncasville, for a big game on Saturday. Quarterfinals, Big East tournament. Can Villanova knock off the undefeated Huskies, potentially in the championship? They have some games to win, though, to get there. We'll talk about that and much more coming up here on WXVU. Villanova Sports Talk rolls along, spring break edition, after this. Welcome back to Villanova Sports Talk here on a Thursday. Glad you could join us. Spring break special edition, and we still have more than 30 minutes left to go. Again, I want to thank Whitey Rigsby for joining the program here on this Thursday. As always, if you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Spotify and also on my YouTube channel later this afternoon. David Szczepanski with you. Villanova defeated DePaul 76-57 yesterday there at Wintrust Arena. And let's talk about Villanova versus Xavier. That'll be the next game coming up for the Wildcats, and that will be on Saturday for Senior Day, as we talked about it with Whitey Rigsby, who just joined the show. Again, thanks to Whitey for joining the program. And the Xavier team, as I mentioned, is a team that has struggled this year, right? You take a look at the overall record, it's not very good. They're under 500, 14-16 overall, 6-13 in conference play. And, when Coach Pitino was hired to come into the program, I think there were a lot of aspirations, and a lot of, expectations that I think a lot of people in Cincinnati wanted to be met. Unfortunately for Xavier fans, it hasn't worked out that way this year. But, still a team that is competitive. I talked about it with Whitey, a team that's only 1-9 on the road. That's definitely something that has hurt them. But, they're a team that's very competitive offensively. And, Whitey said that as well in the show. I mean, this is a team that averages 78 to 79 points per game, a team that can definitely shoot the ball well from behind the arc at 37%. They have one of the best three-point offenses in the Big East. The problem for the Xavier team, and that was really what hurt them in that first matchup against Villanova, where Xavier lost in overtime 92-89, it was the defense, right? This is a Xavier team that gives up 80 points a game. They allow their opponents to shoot 35% from behind the arc. And when you continue to go deeper down the stats and look at just Big East Conference games, this is a Xavier team that I said earlier, 6-13 overall in Big East play, but this is a team that allows 84 points per game against Big East competition. So a team that has really struggled against Big East opponents, and defensively is really one of their biggest issues. And, this is a team that doesn't force a whole lot of turnovers as well defensively. Like I said, the three-point defense has really struggled this year. And that's where I think for Villanova, if you really want to begin this game, and Whitey mentioned as well, if you're Villanova, you're Coach Willard, and you're the staff, the last thing you want to do is play a shootout again on Saturday, where it's, a high-scoring game in the 80s, maybe get into the 90s again. And Villanova won that first match. That was probably the most entertaining game of the season, honestly, for Villanova. Came down to the wire. It was a really fun, really competitive matchup. But, still, you don't want to be in that position again for Villanova. You want to keep it, as Whitey said, slow things down, want to keep it a little bit more low scoring, because to be quite honest with you, if this is a low scoring game, I think Villanova wins this game 99 times out of 100, because I think that Villanova's offense is competitive, and I think Villanova's defense is much better than Xavier. So I think that's kind of the difference there. If this game is high scoring, yes, Villanova won it the first time around, but it really came down to a shot at the very end where Trey Carroll, with about 3 seconds left, he had a chance to win the game and made a bad pass and turned it over. Now, the biggest question in this game is, does Trey Carroll play? He played just 4 minutes against Seton Hall in the loss at home, 77-68 against the Pirates. So maybe this is a game where you take a look at, if Trey Carroll doesn't play, maybe this is a really easy, win for Villanova, and it very well could be. I mean, right now, according to Bart Torvik, Villanova is projected to be very heavy favorites in this matchup. They're projected to be around 12-point favorites in this game. So, if Trey Carroll doesn't play, which that could be a factor in that projected line there from Bart Torvik, maybe, Villanova can win this game by more than 10 points. I think it's definitely a possibility. And, when you continue to go down the list for this Xavier team, I mean, just take a look at some more of the stats on Bart Torvik. Right now, they are the 91st team in the country, according to Bart Torvik. But you take a look at their defense. The 2-point defense, 294th in the country. 284th in the country. The 3-point defense, 222nd in the country. I mean, they are below average in both of the major defensive stats. They're also below average in terms of 2-point offense, 270th in the country. But like I said, they're one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the Big East and all of college basketball. Top 40, they shoot 36% from behind the arc, and that's what keeps them in a lot of games. I mean, you take a look at what they've done from 3-point range this season. They went on a stretch earlier this year from, this was on November the 18th against Old Dominion, to December the 1st against St. Francis. Now, they didn't play the best opponents in this timeline, but solid opponents. Old Dominion, Georgia, West Virginia, Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, and St. Francis. They went on a stretch of 5 games where, according to Bart Torvik, they had at least a green game from behind the arc, which is considered good. And they're tough to get. A lot of them are either in that white category where it's just an average 3-point shooting game, or it's in that red category where it's bad. Well, they put together a stretch of 5, which is very rare to see. Then they went on a stretch in the beginning of Big East play where they struggled a little bit from behind the arc, but in the last few, they put together good performances. These are the last 6 performances from Xavier from behind the arc. 16 for 34 against Marquette. That was their best 3-point shooting game this season. That was on Valentine's Day against the Golden Eagles. 10 for 23, which is considered good against Villanova. 10 for 32, that was considered in the average range. 5 for 22, that was the worst 3-point shooting game for Providence. 5 for 22 again against Providence. And then 10 for 20 against Georgetown. That was a good game, 50% from behind the arc. And then 9 for 22 against Seton Hall. And that was a game where you didn't have Trey Carroll. He played just 4 minutes. Trey Carroll is a 36% 3-point shooter in his own right. So this Xavier team, they can shoot the ball well, and that's kind of the biggest takeaway from this preview. And in terms of players, if they don't have Trey Carroll, it's going to be a really tough game, because not only does Xavier struggle defensively, if their offense loses a player that, like I said, averages 18 points a game, 35% from behind the arc, you're going to be in big trouble. Now, Jovan Milosevic has done a good job this year for Xavier. He's a player that averages 12 points per game, 43% from behind the arc. He's technically their best 3-point shooter on volume, 59 for 136. But if you don't have Trey Carroll, that's going to make his job get a lot tougher. And this is a team also too that I'll bring up in terms of the rebounding. I think that's something to also key on. This is a pretty good rebounding team. 35 rebounds per game. I should say they're not in the top tier, but the reason why I bring that up is because if you don't have Trey Carroll in this lineup, in this rotation on Saturday, this is going to be a bad Xavier rebounding team. Like I said, they're fairly average, 35 rebounds per game, but if you lose Trey Carroll and his 6 rebounds per game, this Xavier team is really going to have a difficult time. And I think that's kind of what hurt them in the most recent game against Seton Hall. It was a game where it was 77-68. The defense struggled against Seton Hall, which really has a difficult time scoring. But you take a look at some of the more box score stats in that game and you open it up. The rebounding battle, 37-30 in favor of Seton Hall, right? You didn't have Trey Carroll in that game. If he picks up those 6 rebounds, which he averages, maybe that's the difference. Maybe that helps them. And then also, too, this Xavier team, they had 11 turnovers. And also in this game against Seton Hall, I think this was perhaps one of the biggest differences. I mean, just 77-68 loss, but Xavier shot the ball well, 42% from the field, 41% from behind the arc. But you take a look at some of the other stats that I think just kind of go deeper into volume here. Defensive rebounding, 23-18 in favor of Seton Hall. And that's been a big difference because, the Xavier team doesn't have Trey Carroll. That really affects the rebounding. And, Seton Hall shot the ball well from the field, almost 50%. The 2-point defense for Xavier really struggled in that game against the Pirates. And this is a Villanova team that I think when you take a look at everything put together, where the defense struggles, they're a bad 2-point defense, bad 3-point defense. But the 3-point defense kind of kept Seton Hall in check a little bit. Now, Seton Hall isn't the best offense, so you could argue that's why. But I think in this game, I think the two players that are lined up to have the biggest games, I think you look to Duke Brennan again, who could have a monster game with the way that the 2-point defense really struggled for Xavier last time out. And then also, too, I think you have to take a look at the ability to shoot the ball from behind the arc if you're this Villanova team. So I think you look at players like a Bryce Lindsey, like a Caden Lewis, but I think Duke Brennan and Tyler Perkins, if they do what they did last night against DePaul, they should easily win this game against Xavier on Saturday, especially if you don't have Trey Carroll. So those are some of the key players I'm watching. Like I said, the defense really struggles, and the Xavier team overall that's 14-16 overall, 6-13 in Big East play. And also, too, when you take a look at the quad 1, quad 2 losses, the Xavier team 0-4 in quad 1A opportunities. They're 0-7 in quad 1 games this year, just 3-8 in quad 2 games. And that's been a huge difference maker for the Xavier team, a big reason why they struggled. And according to Bart Torvik, they have just a 0.4% chance of making the tournament. So this is a game that Villanova has to win, especially if there is no Trey Carroll out there. It seems like he's kind of questionable. We'll see if we get more of an answer, but that's definitely something to keep an eye on. We'll take a break here on Villanova Sports Talk. Again, we have about 30 minutes left to go. Don't forget to vote on my poll questions at WXVU David S. When we come back, we'll talk about Villanova women's basketball and the Big East tournament this weekend in Uncasville. Again, we'll be right back here on WXVU, the 89.1 The Roar. Welcome back to Villanova Sports Talk. 30 minutes left to go. David Szczepanski with you here on a Thursday, and we've kind of been bouncing back and forth. Where we started the show with the breaking news about the women's basketball Big East season awards. We went to men's basketball, recapped the game against DePaul last night, previewed the game against Xavier, talked with Whitey Rigsby, and now we're going to round things out with the bookends of the show to talk about women's basketball and the Big East tournament coming up this Saturday in Uncasville. I should just say this weekend. For Villanova, they'll actually get started on Saturday. But want to take a look at the bracket, where things stand for the Big East women's basketball tournament. And I think this is a great time for Villanova, just in general, because, right, they've been off since last Thursday. And by off, I mean off from game action. Of course, they're practicing, getting ready, and I'm sure they'll be traveling up to Uncasville very soon. But this is a great time. You want to restock, get your players healthy, ready to go, and this is just great for Villanova to have that time to practice and really prep up, because they don't have a game until Saturday, so they still have today and tomorrow to travel up there, get settled in. I think this is a really good opportunity for them. And then being the 2 seed, they are going to play at the 7 p.m. game on Saturday on March 7th. But so what's in store here in terms of when you take a look at the game? So tomorrow at 11 a.m., the first game of the day, again on Friday, March 6th, will be Butler, the 9 seed, against Georgetown, the 8 seed, in Uncasville, Mohegan Sun Arena. Then at 1:30 p.m., you'll have number 10 DePaul versus number 7 Providence. And then at 4 p.m., you'll have number 11 Xavier versus number 6 St. John's. I think St. John's is the best team. I mean, yes, they're the best seed, but St. John's, you could argue, had a chance to get that 5 seed. They really played well at the end of the year. They defeated Villanova. They've had some decent wins. St. John's swept Seton Hall as well. So that's a team that I think you would definitely keep an eye on as a team that could knock off some teams potentially. But for Villanova, the thing that I really like is, they play Game 6 technically at 7 p.m. in the quarterfinals on Saturday, March 7th. But they're going to play the Game 2 winner. They avoid playing St. John's, which I think is key, because St. John's is a team that I think is competitive. They're going to play the winner of DePaul and Providence. And what I really, really like about this game, I think when you take a look at all things combined, is just, I think Villanova matches up well against either team, right? The number 10 DePaul Blue Demons, I think, are a team that Villanova should fairly easily beat. I mean, just when you look at some of the matchups earlier this year, even without Jasmine Bosco, Villanova defeated DePaul on the road. So I think that's definitely something that Villanova can look at in terms of, games and teams that they're potentially going to play this year. And even in the last, so that was the first game, December 29th, 81-48 in favor of Villanova over DePaul. That was a game where Bryn McCary scored 18. Jasmine Bosco only played 8 minutes. She was injured in the first half of that game, but Villanova still played well without her. And I think the key part of that, Villanova outscored outscored DePaul 20-7 in the first quarter, 22-12. The game was pretty much over at halftime, even without Jasmine Bosco. And then in the most recent game against DePaul, that game was at home. That was still a 69-56 win. It was a 13-point victory for the Wildcats in a game where they didn't really play well offensively. Kind of got off to a poor start defensively as well, but Jasmine Bosco scored 27 in that game. She had 5 assists in that contest. Also, Ryan Allen had 17 points. 7 rebounds. So that was definitely somebody to keep an eye on. So I like the match where they played DePaul. And also Providence is a team that Villanova's also beat both times this year, right? You take a look at the Providence game on the road. So they, of course, they did play matchup against Providence twice. The first matchup against Providence was an 85-55 win that was on January the 11th in Rhode Island. This was a game where Villanova just simply dominated. Brennan McCary had 20. Jasmine Bosco had 19, 7 for 17 from the field. In terms of assists, Villanova had 2 players with 7 assists in that game. Bosco had 7. Danae had 7 as well. Danae Carter's stat line in that game against Providence in the first match where Villanova won by 30. Danae had 6 points, right? 2 for 9 from the field, not very efficient. But she had 8 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 steals, and a block in that game against the Friars. And then in the most recent matchup against Providence, that game was at home in the return game at the Finn, and that was also a game where Villanova played well, 83-68 when it was all said and done. And when you take a look at some of the key scorers in that game, Jasmine Bosco at 22 again, Kennedy Henry at 16, Danae Carter, yeah, she was a little inefficient in terms of scoring again, picked up just 2 points, was in some foul trouble, but she had 7 rebounds, 5 assists again. So I think Villanova matches up well against both teams. Ideally, you'd like to play DePaul. They're the lower seed. I think Providence does have some scoring that they can keep up with, right? Sabu Gay, talked about her earlier in today's show, being named to the All Big East second team for the Big East this year in terms of season awards. But this is still a Villanova team that I think matches up really, really well. And actually, I do want to provide a correction there. Sabu Gay was named to the All Big East Conference first team for Providence, so that's even more, just speaks volumes about how good she's been. They have some scoring to Providence, but I think they match up better against DePaul. So that would be the matchup I would prefer to match up against the Blue Demons, the 10 seed. Obviously, it's more likely that favorites do win and the 7 seed Providence wins. But Villanova, again, the first game will be on Saturday, March 7th. You can watch on Peacock as well as NBC Sports Network. That game will be at 7 p.m. Unfortunately, we won't have any WXVU coverage for you, but I'll have coverage on my social media. Again, that's a 7 p.m. It's the game 2 winner, the winner of DePaul versus Providence against Villanova in Uncasville. The other games on that day, the game at noon will be the winner of Butler and Georgetown versus number 1 UConn. The game at 2:30 will be number 5 Creighton versus number 4 Marquette. That's a good matchup to watch as well in that matchup, because if Villanova wins the quarterfinals game, in that matchup, they would play the winner of this next game, which would be the number 3 Seton Hall versus the game 3 winner, which goes back to the Xavier St. John's team. But the reason why I think it's important to bring that up is because the Creighton and Marquette switch, I should say, in terms of that game, that could be important for who plays UConn, right? UConn is the number 1 seed. Obviously, the winner of that Creighton-Marquette game is going to play UConn, and maybe I think both of those teams are fairly competitive, and Marquette almost beat UConn, and I probably should say almost beat, probably fairly lightly, but it was a 15-point game. It was one of the closest games that UConn's played in Big East play this year, so who knows? Maybe Marquette gives UConn a good run, and that can weaken UConn a little bit for if Villanova makes it to the championship game. So that's a good game to watch, but ultimately, Villanova, if they do win the game on Saturday, the quarterfinals, they'll play in the semifinals, and that will be a matchup against the winner of number 3 Seton Hall versus whoever wins that game 3, which is Xavier St. John's, and that is a tougher matchup for Villanova, right? That would be the semifinals matchup where Villanova would be in that spot. But yeah, ideally you'd probably like to play, a Xavier, or a Seton Hall, just because of the way that Villanova dominated Seton Hall this year. You probably want to stay away from St. John's, and St. John's did hand Villanova one of those Big East losses. But that will be a Sunday problem if you get there. And then the final will be on March 9th. That is Monday at 7 p.m. Hopefully Villanova gets there. I think there's a great chance they get there. I mean, the path is fairly simple. Don't want to say it's super simple, but it's fairly simple, right? You win the game in the quarterfinals on Saturday. I think Villanova should beat both DePaul and Providence. I think the test rate, maybe you get a little bit more competitive in the semifinals game, but to also kind of acknowledge the fact that, I mean, if you beat Seton Hall a third time, or maybe you get, another game against St. John's and you defeat a St. John's team that's been competitive, maybe that helps bolster your resume. I think that's also something to keep an eye on. And then, of course, the championship is tough if Villanova can get there, but I think they have a good path, right? You have to beat one of, DePaul and Providence in that first game on Saturday, like I said, and then you have to defeat one of Seton Hall, St. John's, and Xavier, and I think Villanova's the better team out of all 3. So Villanova's in a good spot. heading into the Big East tournament. But again, the first game, Big East tournament, you can watch on Peacock or NBC Sports Network. That's Saturday, March 7th, the quarterfinals. Villanova versus the winner of DePaul, the 10th seed, and the number 7 seed, Providence. And again, just recapping some of those topics from the beginning of today's show, right? Bryn McCary was the Big East Most Improved Player. Jasmine Bosco named to the All-Big East first team. Bryn McCary was also named to the All-Big East second team. Kennedy Henry was named to the All-Big East freshman team. She also was named to the All-Big East defensive team. So a lot of accolades. I was a little surprised that Danae Carter didn't get on any of the teams. I thought maybe she even deserved a spot on the defensive team, but ultimately they did decide against that. But a lot of Villanova players getting good awards this morning, so that is great to see. And of course, getting ready for the Big East tournament on Saturday in Uncasville. That will be, again, the first game for Villanova in the quarterfinals, but the tournament does technically begin tomorrow. And again, just taking a look at that seeding, talked about it before Whitey Rigsby joined the show, but Villanova, according to Charlie Cream with ESPN's bracketology, Villanova right now is still in that 9 seed spot. They would be slated to take on USC in the 8 seed, and if they win that game, they would play Texas, the number 1 seed in Austin. Again, this is from Charlie Cream of ESPN bracketology, and that would be a tough matchup, right? USC is a good team as the 8 seed, and obviously you would love to have the opportunity to win that game and take on the number 1 seed Texas, but obviously one step at a time. And like I said, if Villanova wins the game on Saturday against DePaul or Providence, they win the game on Sunday and keep it competitive against UConn, maybe there's a chance, right? You add 2 more wins to your resume, you keep it close against UConn for the second time out of 3 matchups this season. Maybe you can sneak your way into the 8 seed, maybe even the 7 seed. And right now, in terms of the bracketology as well, there's only 2 Big East teams going. Seton Hall is on the wrong side of the bubble. They're not even really close. They would have to win the Big East tournament to get that bid. So Villanova, UConn, the only 2 teams going from the Big East women's side of things, but hopefully they match up in the championship. And I think that's what everybody wants to see, right? I mean, UConn would obviously be favored to win that game. UConn is undefeated, right? Another legendary season for Coach Oriema, who was also named Big East Coach of the Year earlier today, I should say, earlier this morning. But you want to see that matchup. That's what everybody has their eyes on this weekend in Uncasville, in Connecticut, right under the lights. The third matchup between Villanova and UConn. The first matchup was really lopsided. UConn ran away with that. Villanova got off to a terrible start in Connecticut. And then the most recent game was a game where Villanova had a lot of things go their way in the first half, and Villanova, did struggle a little bit in that third quarter, and UConn eventually pulled away. But maybe another crack. The third crack could keep it close, and who knows? I mean, I think at the end of the day, if you're Villanova, you just want to keep it within 10 or 15 points, especially if you're able to keep it within 15 points on the road in Uncasville. I know it's technically a neutral site, but let's face it, Uncasville is not far from Gamble Pavilion, not far from Storrs, Connecticut, on UConn's campus. This is basically a home game for UConn in the Big East tournament. If Villanova can keep it within 15 on the road, I would feel really confident with that performance. And Villanova's playing its best basketball, right? We talked about it on Thursday against Seton Hall when Villanova played its final regular season game. Jasmine Bosco, she's played some of the best basketball of her career. Danae Carter, I think she's playing the best basketball of her career. And in addition to that, you have Bryn McCary, who just got some awards this morning. As I said, Big East Most Improved Player from a season ago. She's healthy. She is going to make an impact. And I think also, too, the X factor, somebody to keep an eye on in terms of the bench. You got to get Ryan Allen going again. She struggled over the last few games. If you can pick up her offensive output again and pick up some more threes, that's going to be key for Villanova as well if they want to make a run, not just in the Big East tournament, but also in March Madness. And like I said, both of the men's and women's teams slated to be in the tournament. I think it's a lock, really, for both teams. The men's team right now projected to be a 7 seed. I think they could fall back to the 8 seed. We'll keep an eye on that. Again, this was updated a few days ago by Joe Lenardi, so it's not the up-to-date thing, with 2 days ago since this was updated. But Villanova slated to be that 7 seed right now, facing TCU as the 10 seed for the men's side of things. And then the women's side of things, as I said, Villanova right now that 9 seed slated to take on the 8 seed USC, I apologize. And then the winner of that would take on the winner of Texas and High Point, assuming that favorites win. Villanova, if they're able to defeat USC and actually defeat the favorite USC as the 8 seed, then they would take on Texas. So that's where both teams stand, but a good problem to have, as we talked about with Whitey Rigsby here on the Spring Break special of Villanova Sports Talk. When we come back, we'll talk about some baseball and softball as well, around give some shout-outs to our spring sports, and wrap things up with the poll questions. Last chance to vote on my Twitter, at WXVU David S. We'll be back in 60 seconds here on Villanova Sports Talk. Don't touch that dial. Much more coming up. Still about 20 minutes left to go with the show. Right back after this. Welcome back to Villanova Sports Talk here on a Thursday, the special Spring Break edition. David Szczepanski with you. So glad to have you with us, and once again want to thank Whitey Rigsby for joining the show. An action-packed episode talked about Villanova men's basketball, broke down where everything stands. The women's basketball team heading into the Big East tournament, again, going to play on Saturday. The winner of the DePaul and Providence game, Villanova will take on Saturday. So looking forward to that game. That will start at 7 p.m. on March 7th. You can watch on Peacock. I'll have updates on my social media. And let's talk about some of the spring sports before we end the show with the poll questions. You can vote on my Twitter at WXVU David S. The baseball team was on the road yesterday in Jacksonville, Florida, taking on the University of North Florida. It was a 4-0 victory for the baseball team. 5 Wildcats combined for the shutout yesterday as they held North Florida to just 3 hits. Villanova is now 3-6 on the season. And Villanova, a team that, like I said, pitched well yesterday and offensively did some good things as well. The Wildcats opened the scoring. We're in the top of the first right away. Austin Lemon had a walk for the Wildcats, and he came around to score from a RBI single from John Freitag. That gave the Wildcats a 1-0 lead. Villanova added 2 runs in the 5th inning. And like I said, the pitching staff really played well in this game and pitched well. First shutout of the year for the Wildcats, and again, they only gave up 3 hits against North Florida as the sophomore Jack Chavez, he started, worked 3 scoreless innings, allowed just 1 hit, also had 3 strikeouts in the game. Again, Matthew Kahn, also the sophomore, he came into the game following Chavez. And he also had 3 hitless innings out of the bullpen. He technically got the win. And then J.P. Pogorski and Graham Moore shut the door there for the Wildcats. So Villanova improved to 3-6 yesterday with a win against North Florida. Got a 4-0 win, a shutout win. And that was good for the Wildcats because prior to that they had lost 4 consecutive games, lost to Lipscomb University 9-8, and then were swept in the weekend series in late February against Florida Atlantic. They lost all 3 of those games convincingly. They only combined for 14 runs in those 3 games while their pitching staff allowed 37 runs. So a good bounce-back win in the lone game in Jacksonville at Harmon Stadium against the University of North Florida. And the baseball team will now take on Florida A&M for a 3-game series on March 6th, March 7th, and March 8th. The home opener for the Wildcats will be on March 10th versus LaSalle University at Plymouth Meeting, the Villanova Ballpark at Plymouth Meeting. That game will begin. First pitch is at 3:35 p.m. So that's something to look forward to as the weather gets warmer. Great to see that from the baseball team. Again, a big win against North Florida yesterday on March 4th, a midweek battle for them. And then the softball team, a team that has struggled to begin the 50th year for the softball team, but still a team that has played well over the last couple of years and definitely has a chance to make some noise heading in to the Big East Conference. They played a fairly tough schedule as well, right? Villanova really struggled in the Buzz Classic to begin the year, and most recently Villanova lost to the University of Michigan 9-2. That was in the UVA Party at Palmer Invitational. Villanova in that stretch of games, which only lasted, it was a weekend series, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, but they played 5 games, including a couple doubleheaders. Villanova was 2-3 in that stretch. Picked up their only 2 wins of the season, both of them being at Bucknell, an 8-7 win against Bucknell on Friday, and then a 17-2 win against Bucknell on Saturday. So those were the only 2 wins of the season so far for Villanova. The Wildcats are just 2-18, 0-5 away. But like I said, they played a tough schedule, and Villanova is now going to get ready to begin Big East play. They're going to play DePaul on March 6th. So tomorrow, weekend series, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday against DePaul in Chicago. And then they'll head to Monmouth, and they'll come home for the Big East opener on March 13th versus Butler, the Villanova softball complex on campus. And like I said, I think when they get home, head into Big East play, they played some good competition. I mean, they played Michigan, who's a good team. They played Kansas, who's a pretty good team. And then earlier this year, they went through a tough stretch, right? They played University of Alabama in Atlanta. They played Georgia Tech a couple times as well. East Carolina University is a competitive team. So they've definitely played a tough schedule. It was good to see them pick up 2 wins and kind of end the losing streak, if you will, of the UVA Party at Palmer Invitational. That was in Charlottesville, Virginia. Like I said, playing some Big East teams. I think Villanova's in a much better spot. So we'll keep an eye on the softball team. Again, the home opener coming up for the Wildcats on March 13th. That's next Friday, so a week away from tomorrow, getting ready for some softball action. So good to check in with the spring sports, both baseball and softball. All right, it is time to get to our poll questions here on WXVU. Again, we have 4 of them for you. You can vote on my Twitter at WXVU David S. And as always, great to have you with us here on this Friday here on WXVU. And I believe we may have just had somewhat of an internet outage here at Villanova, or unless Twitter is down. So I'm going to try to pull up the poll questions for you here. Had them up on my laptop. But again, just want to thank everybody for the support. Let's see if I could pull them up here. Give me a moment, everybody. Always good to have technical difficulties here on the spring break episode. But it seems like we may be back in business now. Again, 4 poll questions. You can vote on my Twitter at WXVU David S. There we go. We're all back up and running again. First poll question for you here on this Thursday. Who was the player of the game for Villanova men's basketball versus DePaul? Was it Duke Brennan, Tyler Perkins, Devin Askew, or Malachi Palmer? Of course, talked about this with Whitey Rigsby about 30 minutes or so ago. Personally, the voting is very split right now. Actually, 42.4% for both Duke Brennan and Tyler Perkins. I'm going to give it to Duke Brennan, and the reason why is, his 13th double-double of the season, second most in Villanova program history. But without Matt Hodge, the way that he played, the way that the veterans played, and again, Coach Willard talked about this in his post-game press conference, was extremely impressive. And Brennan, they needed him to be well, especially in the rebounding category. Picked up 12 rebounds, like I said, scored 15 points. He is the go-to guy as far as I'm concerned, just in terms of now without Matt Hodge, you have to find a way to score in the paint. Villanova did lose the battle in the paint against DePaul, but like I said, without Duke Brennan, Villanova would really be in deep trouble. So as Whitey said, you have to find a way to keep Duke on the court. And last night you saw that left wrist taped up again, and he's playing through it. It's obviously not something that's keeping him from playing. But at this point in the season, I think other teams are going to realize that without Matt Hodge, this depth for Villanova at the forward position is really, really thin, and teams are going to start attacking Duke, I think, a little bit more and try to get him into foul trouble, get him in some bad situations in the paint, and does Villanova have an answer? Is Malachi Palmer, that answer for Villanova? Hopefully. He's played much better, especially in Big East play. At 10 points last night, one of the best games of his career. But can he do that consistently against some of the best teams in the Big East? We'll find out. But Duke Brennan is my answer. Both Duke Brennan and Tyler Perkins receiving 42% of the vote, 9% for Malachi Palmer, 6% for Devin Askew. We didn't talk about Devin a whole lot, but I thought he hit some big threes off the bench for Villanova, and it seems like he's been the go-to player on the road. I mentioned that earlier, so he played well last night. But I'll go with Duke Brennan. I'll break the tie for now, but again, you can still vote. There's still a few hours left to vote on my Twitter at WXVU David S. Poll question 2, what will be the result of Villanova men's basketball versus Xavier on Saturday for senior day? Villanova wins by 1 to 7 points. Villanova wins by 8 to 13 points. Villanova wins by 14 plus points, or Xavier wins. I agree with Whitey completely here. I think the crowd on Saturday is going to be really, really loud, right? Villanova's headed to the big dance. Last game, at home this season. They're not going to play there again this year. I think the crowd's going to be really loud. I think Villanova wins this game by 8 to 13 points. And I think it's on the higher side of things. I think Villanova wins by 10 to 11 when it's all said and done. And that's where a majority of the voters fall. 44.7% saying Villanova wins by 8 to 13 points. 42% saying Villanova wins by 1 to 7 points. But I like where Villanova is heading into this game. I think Villanova's in a good spot off the win against DePaul. Xavier has struggled this year, like I said, a below 500 record, especially if Trey Carroll doesn't play. I mentioned it earlier. You can go back and listen to the preview of that game. But Villanova's three-point offense against this bad three-point defense, bad defense as a whole for Xavier, I think is going to play really well. I think if I had to put a score on it, I would say 79-65 in favor of Villanova. Maybe 79-67, somewhere around there. I think it's around a 12-point win when it's all said and done. That's where I'll go. And I guess technically if I said 79-65, I would have selected Villanova wins by 14 plus. So I'll officially say my score prediction 79-67 in favor of Villanova by 12 points. Poll question 3, in your opinion, which team would be the most favorable matchup for Villanova in the first round of the Big East tournament? Again, this is talking about the men's basketball team. Marquette, DePaul, Xavier, or Butler. Whitey may have convinced me, right? He was talking about DePaul, being a favorable matchup for Villanova. I would have to agree with him. I think the offense for DePaul really struggled last night, and that's definitely a positive. But I will also argue DePaul is a better three-point shooting team than what they showed last night. This DePaul team is about 34%, 33% from behind the arc. They can shoot the ball better than 13%. If they did, they would have probably stayed in the game much longer, especially in the second half. But out of those 4 teams, I agree. Marquette is the toughest matchup by far for me. Xavier without Trey Carroll could be the easiest. I think Butler, the main reason why I think I was thinking about them the most heading into this episode was because Villanova, I think, played 2 of its best games of the Big East playing all season against Butler, especially that game on the road at Hinkle Fieldhouse. Villanova played exceptionally well. So I think Villanova's got a chance there to play Butler, got a big chance, of course, to win that game. But I agree with what Whitey was saying, DePaul, but ultimately Providence, right? Without Kim English coming back next year, does this team have a whole lot to play for? No. They're not making the tournament. That would probably be the best matchup now thinking more about it. But, to kind of play devil's advocate a little bit there, Providence offensively can score. This is a team in the Friars that, they struggle a lot defensively, but if Villanova's offense struggles and they don't shoot the ball well from behind the arc, which they didn't last night in the first half against DePaul, despite the Blue Demons having a really bad three-point defense, maybe it's closer than some people think. I'm going to say, out of these four teams, I'm going to say DePaul at 40%. That's where the voters fell, but it very well, maybe Providence as the team that a lot of people would like to face. But I'm going to say DePaul as of right now. DePaul's the most likely, right? DePaul right now will take on Georgetown in the 6 seed versus the 11 seed game. The winner of that game is going to play Villanova. So I think DePaul's probably the most favorable option to win that game. 40% saying DePaul, 41% saying Butler. Poll question 4, will Villanova women's basketball make the Big East Tournament Championship, yes or no? I'm surprised this is as close as it is. There's a decent amount of votes on this as well. 63% saying yes, 37% saying no. I think this is a yes. I mean, Villanova should easily win the first game against a Providence or a DePaul. I don't think there's any question about that. Yeah, I mean, if St. John's wins the game tomorrow and they play Seton Hall and St. John's wins that game, because you have to remember, St. John's has defeated Seton Hall both times they matched up this year. So maybe St. John's wins that game and plays Villanova. Maybe it's closer than some people think. But if Villanova just plays their best basketball, as they have, or even brings their B-plus game to this tournament, and on Saturday against the winner, assuming that Villanova wins the quarterfinals matchup, they are much better than St. John's. They're much better than Seton Hall. Seton Hall's really banged up. I don't think Villanova should have any problem getting to the championship. I mean, the only problem I could foresee Villanova having is if they don't shoot the ball well, right? They have a game, whether it's hopefully it's not in the quarterfinals, but in the semifinals where, maybe they only shoot 20% from behind the arc, they turn the ball over, maybe it's low scoring, and Villanova's come up with some big defensive stops, but they're better than everybody besides UConn in the conference on paper. I mean, well better than everybody in my opinion, and credit to Coach Dillon and her staff. So I'm going to say yes. I'm surprised that it's that close. I mean, you have to win these games, right? I mean, Villanova's the favorite on paper, but you still have to play the games. I get that, but I think Villanova's the favorite there. So I think a lot to like there for Villanova getting back to the Big East Tournament Championship. And like I said, I think the goal in that championship, if they get there, keep it within 10 or 15 points. Probably 10 is definitely thinking a little too positively, but keep it within 15, keep it within 20. I think Villanova would be very happy with that performance. I would be, at least. I mean, heading into the NCAA tournament, if you'll lose in the Big East Tournament competitive to UConn, you may be an 8 seed, you're probably going to be a 9 seed. I think Villanova could draw it up well. And I mean, look, there's a chance that Villanova could beat a 1 seed. I mean, this Villanova team, I think their depth, and I've said this over the last couple months, this depth for this Villanova team is extremely impressive. And if there's a chance that they can beat a 1 seed, I don't think, I mean, it's obviously not likely. Villanova would be heavy underdogs in that game. They're going to be heavy underdogs against UConn. But if Villanova plays its best basketball, like I said, and they shoot the ball well, and Jasmine Bosco gets 20 plus as she had so easily over the last month or so, Villanova's got a fighting chance against a 1 seed. Now you got to win the 8-9 game, and that's what happens, and you get there and you play the 1 seed if it's a Texas. But I mean, Villanova's played the best team in the country, played a dynasty, played, in my opinion, the favorite who's going to win the tournament, win the NCAA tournament in UConn. I don't think there's any reason why Villanova couldn't keep it competitive in a 1 seed game. I mean, that's me thinking a little too positively, but I mean, you have to get there first. And I think the Big East tournament is a big test, right? They got to see, can they continue to play consistently well? But the offense is playing well again. That was my biggest concern kind of in the early part of February is the offense good enough? I think it is. I mean, they have to shoot the ball well. They have to, take care of the basketball. They're one of the best teams in terms of limiting turnovers, especially in the Big East. They do that. They should be on their way to the Big East Tournament Championship once again in Uncasville on Monday. Well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to this spring break episode of Villanova Sports Talk. Great to talk Villanova sports with you all. And I do apologize. It was a little bit kind of all over the place in today's episode. Right? We started with women's basketball. We got our way to men's hoops. We talked with Whitey, of course. And then towards the end of today's program, I wanted to sprinkle in a little bit of spring sports baseball and softball. But we covered a lot. I hope that you enjoyed it. Stephen will be back with me next week. And also want to mention, too, special announcement next week on Thursday. I'm going to talk with, earlier in the week, it will be a recorded interview, but I'm going to talk with the softball head coach, Coach Bridget Orchard, who has done a great job for this softball program. As I said earlier, the Wildcats struggling a little bit to begin the season, but I think once they get back home, they're going to be playing some much better softball. But I'm going to be talking with her for the 50th anniversary of Villanova softball here on Program History. So I'm going to be chatting with Coach Orchard. I'll have that interview for you next Thursday, and we'll be back at the normal time slot from 11 a.m. to noon here on WXVU. We'll get you ready for for everything to go as well. So looking forward to that. Again, 11 a.m. to noon here on WXVU next Thursday. I'll keep an update, if anything changes with the Big East tournament, maybe we do have to push some things back and move some things around in terms of time framing. But as of right now, scheduled from 11 a.m. to noon. If anything changes, again, you can stay tuned on my social media at WXVU David S on Twitter. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank Whitey Rigsby for joining the show. Today, always great to chat with Whitey. I'm David Szczepanski. Have a great rest of your day, Nova Nation. Thanks for tuning into the Spring Break Special Villanova Sports Talk. And as always, go Cats!